Welcome to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. In today's episode, we dive deep into the critical importance of having a structured sales plan and how it can make or break your team's success. Our guest, Richard Cogswell, a veteran sales leader and author, shares actionable strategies on how to build a mission-led culture that aligns your sales team with long-term goals. You'll also hear how empowering your sales reps to create their own focused plans can drive accountability and results. Stay tuned for a conversation that will transform the way you lead your sales team towards sustainable growth.
We've got a special guest today. Today, we're joined with another sales professional, Rich Cogswell. Rich is a 20-year sales veteran and leads an entire region. He leads the APAC region in the FinTech space, but he's also an author, and I don't want to steal all his thunder. I'm going to let him introduce a little bit about himself. Rich, glad to have you today. Tell us where you are.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast. I've been in sales all my professional career. I kind of fell into sales, but found a very happy home, thankfully, in the payments industry. That has taken me to my current role as a kind of B2B card issuer in Asia Pacific. And yeah, I guess I've had a very normal journey in sales. I started off, obviously, as a single contributor. I actually started off in commission-only sales in the insurance industry, which is probably the hardest baptism you can find, and probably set me up in opposition to a lot of the things I experienced there, because it was something of a boiler room, I have to say, and the kind of thing that most people relate to when they think about sales in a negative fashion, really hard selling ABC type of environment. You'll always be closing, but gravitated into B2B complex enterprise sales. Was promoted with no training, as I think probably most people are, and then gravitated to various roles where you're asked to come and turn around a situation or you build something from scratch.
You've got a book out, you're leading a team, and we were talking offline here, kind of preparing for this, and you mentioned something that I think would resonate with our audience, and that's really about organizations and why they need, but maybe don't have, an articulated go-to-market plan.
I think I probably have had a very normal experience in this sense that when you are first promoted to sales leadership and you haven't had any training, what's the first thing you think to do? It's like, I'll go and find my predecessor's plan, and that will give me some sensibility of how to do this role, because you're not doing single contribution anymore. You suddenly have a lot on your plate, a lot to deal with, and that would certainly help. But 9 times out of 10, if not 100% of the time, you're not going to find that plan. And what that tends to lead to is that you tend to throw yourself into that role. I certainly did, with enthusiasm. And if you're already living in a financial year to financial year type of survival mode, the chances are you're not going to change that. When I look back, having been in a position to write a book now, and I think back to places I've worked and environments I've been in, I've worked for a number of organizations in a number of different places. And I can only think of a couple who really did have an articulated go-to-market or a sales plan that underpinned that. And it surprises me, because that's something that I think comes as a basic. And I think if you are a commercial leader and you don't have that, then I'm sorry. I think, number one, that is your responsibility to create one, because how else do you have a conversation with cross-functional leaders and align so that everybody is on one page, going towards the same goals? How do you bring back a data-based conversation about what's happening in the market, for example? And how can you articulate to your leadership what needs to be true to win and what your big bets are? If you don't actually have any structure, what's probably happening is you have a sort of scattergun, shotgun type of go for anything type of environment, and you probably have a lot of business that doesn't make a lot of sense at the end of the day. I've kind of, over time, built myself in opposition to environments that aren't structured in that way. But then I've also always been something of a servant leader. And I think really the transformational piece, potentially to get you beyond financial year to financial year and into something a little more longer term, is to fuse people to a mission-led culture and something that people are growing in, something that people are enjoying. Sales has to be fun at the end of the day. If it's not, something's going wrong. If you can meld those two elements together, then potentially you can really have something that has a 3 to 5 year horizon beyond what you're prosecuting in your current year.
Put a lot of meat on that bone. There's so many things that you just talked about that we could dig into. I love the idea that you have to have a sales plan. You have to have a plan of where you're going to go, how you're going to get there. Kevin and I are fractional VPs of sales, and many times when we're brought into a client, we don't get that. They don't have that. That's part of their problem. That's part of the reason why they need us. And it's one of those deliverables that we frequently have to suggest to our clients. So we have to build out a sales plan, sales playbook for them to use so that when we leave, the next person does have that document that they can then take forward and grow from, right? That is so important. As you've developed those over time in your career and as you've learned that you needed that, and when you first started out as a VP of sales, you thought maybe you could wing it without it potentially. And then you learned that it'd be really nice if all this was written down and documented and had agreed upon. Did you have any pushback from management? Did you have any pushback from your sales team as you first were doing that, as you've kind of introduced that concept of, guys, we need to document this and put a plan together? Just your thoughts on that in the real world.
That's a great point, because if you're radically trying to change what has been the status quo, it is shocking, and you have to bring everybody along that journey. And I think this is ultimately, again, why so many first-time leaders fail, because you're suddenly elevated from being proficient of what you've been doing as a single contributor. But now you're playing on a playing field where you've got to bring everybody along on the ride. You've got to align with everybody. And that doesn't just mean your team. It means your leadership. It means cross-functional partners in support, onboarding, compliance, legal, whatever the nature of your business is in the market. And if you are proposing a change for the better, you've really got to be selling all the time, internally as much as you are externally. What this is leading me to is to a kind of tool that I developed over time, which is, if you can't put it all on one page, then you're probably also struggling. And I think, you've got to summarize things in a way that you can take to these various conversations, whether it be a new joiner coming in, trying to pick up what the mission is, through to your management. And the way I think about this is that any business is there to hit its goals. None of this is to diminish ambition or aggression in the marketplace. You've got to have your financials front and center, or whatever those goals are. But then you add to that in terms of what are your focuses, and to have those, you have to become expert in your business enough to know what your pipeline's telling you. Do you need to focus and finish, or do you need to land and expand, or a combination of the two? Do you know who your top clients are? Have you got specific sales plans around them to land and expand them? What are the top 3 focuses you're going to put into play there? Because I do believe in sort of narrowing the aperture to do more, as opposed to having a 5 to 10 point plan. Do a 3 to 4 point plan, put things down, and then add to it. You put down those top priorities, and then you add the values and behaviors that are important to make all of this happen. Because behaviors create culture that lead to results, right? And you can illustrate all of this with quite meaningful language. I've already used focus and finish and land and expand. You can have better together. You can have building bridges to win, things that bring all of this to life. And then you've got to add to that, what must be true to win, and what are your big bets? And if you have space on the page, as a leader, what are your priorities? What are you focusing on? In any environment, what your boss is most focused on is what tends to be important as well. And if you can then formally sit down with, let's say, head of operations, for example, right? And you say, listen, I just want to take you through this. I want to align this with you, have a discussion about what your goals are, and let's figure out how we weld those two things together, right? And you do that across all those components. And you have some sensibility of having a sales plan against that. But you've already set a template to address some of those concerns or questions, or why are we doing this? Why are you proposing these things, right? Because you can have a much more structured conversation about anything. Let's use the example of when I was first promoted. I felt I couldn't ask for any investment in training for myself, because I felt I had to prove something. I had been given this promotion. I had to give something back before I could ever ask for anything. And it took me about a year and a half before I asked for training. But, if you have something structured as I've just described, you can already say, hey, I would like to propose this because the return on investment is going to be this, or investment in my leadership journey is going to help the whole company in a more structured way. I think the way that you go about it is going to determine how successful you are. And, again, you talk about the book. I try to describe in a very sort of structured, layered way how you can go about setting that up. But the only point I would add to that is that you have to be authentically yourself in that. You can't just take somebody's template and go and run it like a playbook. You have to bring something of yourself, your environment, your industry to it for it to really meld and work.
That's really insightful. And there's a lot of meat on that bone. I love the phrase there, Sean, meat on the bone. But our listening audience is largely people in sales, carrying bags, and sales leaders. I want to hone this in because I think there's some actionable takeaways that people can utilize for their business. You said a few things. What are your big bets? And getting beyond the fiscal year to fiscal year focus and closer to a mission-led culture. Let's talk to the sales leaders out there in our industry. There's a rash of 18 months. It's in and out, in and out. And I think it's largely the result of not having that mission-led culture on a simple, not easy, simple to understand document. Can you talk about what a mission culture looks like pre-work, in the midst of work, and after that culture has been built? Like how can an outsider look in and say, "Ooh, they've got a mission-led culture," in your words?
Culture is not something you put on a page. Organizations that do that but don't live it are already being very inauthentic, and it's very obvious to the staff working whether they have leaders who are walking the walk or talking the talk or not. So it is a process, and it's something you've got to work at. And one of the first things I would be doing when coming into any group is trying to identify who my leaders are. Who are the pillars? To do that, you've got to share something of yourself, right? What are your values and behaviors, and what's important to you? But if you can find these people, then you can start to work through them. They can become, you obviously have a structured conversation with them about potentially taking on that role or inhabiting those values. But it's also about, instead of having KPIs all the time, it's more about creating behaviors. I think about escalations, for example. You can have environments where you're constantly escalated to as a leader. But if you're trying to throw that back and say, well, who have you spoken to? What does your network look like around this? What are the ideas you've got? You're already trying to confer on others the necessity for them to think creatively about their business and therefore the business. You're already starting to show in your interactions, I'm not going to direct you here. I'm not going to give you the answer, which is not to say don't escalate anything at all. It's trying to break cycles. And another way to do that, again, we can talk about creation of the sales plan. Something I started doing very, very early was to ask my salespeople to create their plan, around about Q3. I can't understand companies who give a budget on January 1st or have a sales kickoff in February or March. It doesn't make any sense to me. But if you ask them for that and you give them a template, obviously, otherwise you get all kinds of formats of things back. But, given that that the challenge is going to be within a certain number, where are you going to focus? What are your big bets? What do you think needs to be true to win? What investments, if any, do you need? And what is going to break the back of your number quickly? Then have a conversation based around that. Again, you're asking them to think about their businesses, which the best of them will be, of course, but you want the whole group to be thinking that way. And then when things either get challenging or there's a delta between the budget that's given and the sales plan that you guys have built from the ground up, you've got a better conversation in terms of brainstorming how you go about things.
I agree. I hate to interrupt you because that was a great point, but we're running out of time. And I really want to give you a minute or two to talk about your book and talk about how people can get a hold of you. If you could give us that insight real quick, I'd appreciate it.
My apologies. I get passionate about this. So the book is The Cultural Sales Leader, Sustaining People Attaining Results. It's available wherever you get books. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, in many places. RichardCogswell.com you can find me at, or my LinkedIn. Please do track me down on LinkedIn. I post around a lot of these topics on there as well.
Thank you very much for your time, Rich. I do appreciate it. You've been great. You've been fantastic. I think we kind of warned you at the beginning that these 15 minutes just fly by, and they always do. And I apologize. I feel bad because you were going great and we just ran out of time. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you to everybody.
Invite me back.
Yeah, I would love to have you back. Let's do that. Let's have you back sometime. Thank you very much. And everybody out there, please reach out to Richard to go check out his book. And we would love to have you back sometime in the future. Thank you.
I learned so much, and I am sure our listeners did as well. What a great episode, Sean, Kevin, and Richard. Personally, I really valued your conversation about the importance of moving beyond the year-to-year survival mindset and embracing a mission-led culture. Richard shared how sales leaders can build a team focused on long-term growth by clearly defining goals, values, and behaviors. It's not just about hitting numbers, but creating a shared mission that motivates everyone to work toward the same outcome. Before we go, don't forget the actionable item Richard mentioned. Create a one-page sales plan today. This simple but powerful tool will give your team clear direction and help align everyone on your big bets and priorities. It's the foundation for strong cross-functional alignment and long-term success. So don't wait. Take action now before the day-to-day rush pushes it to the back burner. Richard's book, The Cultural Sales Leader: Sustaining People, Attaining Results, is linked in the show notes. Check it out. It is a great read for any existing or aspiring leader. If you ever need help with sales, sales management, or scaling your business, reach out to Sean or Kevin. Contact details are in the show notes. Plus, take our quick 10-question assessment linked below to see how your sales team is performing and where you might need support. Until next Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, happy selling.